take your seats, we'd like to just get started with the I also encourage you to hello everyone. My name is Nico Whedon and I'm Public Programs Manager here at the museum. There's the exciting intersections between literature and contemporary art. Of Black, Color, Material Concept, our mezzanine exhibition, the possibilities of Black. In celebrating the publication of exhibiting artist Wardell Milan's first monograph, published by Osmos, this program will celebrate his 10-year history BFA in photography and painting Skowhegan at School of Yale University in 2004. Exhibiting here at the Studio Museum in Frequency in 2000. Artist in residence here at the museum, and his residency exhibit in 2007, and went on to. He's included in anthologies such as Yourself in the World, Selected Writings and Interviews by Glenn Ligon, ongoing bodies of work on paper gallery in 2012, Kingdom or Exile, Parisian Landscapes at Savannah Landscapes at Osmos Address in 2014. So in tonight's Life, Jay-Z, From Brooklyn to the Boardroom, and Alvin's Guide to Good Business. Hall has also hosted programs on current events and contemporary art for the BBC Radio 4. In the U.S., he's a regular contributor on finance and the economy on NPR's Tell Me More with Michael Martin. Hall lives here in New York City, where he leads acclaimed teaching programs and speaking engagements on investment market strategy. Hall is a member of the NYSE Euronext Financial Literacy Advisory Committee and serves on the Acquisitions Committee here at the Studio Museum in Harlem. So tonight's conversation will be moderated by Lauren Haynes, all the way to the right, Associate Curator, Permanent Collection, who organized the exhibition upstairs. And hopefully we'll have enough time at the end of the program to go up there and see Wardell's work in the exhibition with our own eyes. So I'll hand the microphone over to you, Lauren, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, Nico. Thank you, everybody. I'm thrilled to sort of be a part of this conversation and to think about, I guess, for me, the last 9 years of engagement with your work, Del, just because when you were an artist in residence was when I first started working here at the Studio Museum, so it's been to dive into that and to also hear you and Alvin speak a lot about the book, but also just the relationship the two of you have and how, Alvin, you've become acquainted and a huge fan and a huge ally for Del and his work. So,
well, it is on. Alvin and I met here in the museum, 2000 and what year was that? 7 maybe?
2007.
2007.
Yes.
I was here in the gallery space looking at art, and Alvin, I was wearing this hat. I was in a hat, and Alvin comes up behind me. He and I had never met. He's never met. He's like, "Why are you wearing that hat?"
I did.
I was like, "Who the f is this? Who is this guy?" Like,
yes.
Telling me, asking me about my fashion. But that was our introduction, and so we have always had a very kind of fluid friendship, and it's never been.
I think it was push-pull at first because he really didn't know what to make of my comments or what my intentions were. One of my teasing, and sometimes it sounds confrontational, but it isn't. But it's designed to see how they react to a whole series of little things, and he reacted amazingly well. And I understood how he may think I'm sort of like this creepy little guy. I got that part of it. But, you know, I was pretty consistent. I'd run into you on the street, and I would always say hello. I would always ask about you. How was your, how your project's doing? Because what I saw in Wardell's work was an exceptional skill with drawing. That was the first thing that I saw. And then the second thing that I saw was what I thought was a cleverness. And I use that word deliberately because I thought in the early days he had been thinking about things and it hadn't quite settled in, but the exploration in the early work had a really strong skill set, and it was clever. And there would be a point where it would all just come together. And I believed from the very beginning. I told you that from the very, I've never doubted.
Yeah.
I have never had a doubt.
Right. Yeah, so Alvin has been a strong supporter since the very beginning. We have done studio visits and dinners and you know, hang out. So there's always not only a friendship there, but this really strong support in terms of my practice and studio practice and wanted to be just there as a champion. So thank you for that.
And the first time I saw the boxing work was perhaps for me the greatest moment. In fact, I can still remember seeing the boxing work and then being intrigued. And then Jeannie Greenberg, but I think it was 20 of them or 40 of them.
She brought a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of them at her townhouse. And she owned Salon 94. And we were friendly, and she had me over to see them. And it was in that single moment of sitting upstairs in her apartment, in her house, looking at those drawings, that I knew it was just brilliant. Because in those, it played with scale, it played with plane, it played with emotion. All of those things came out of those 20 drawings.
You said are we friends?
But I lusted after that work. I mean, it was major lust. I wanted that work so badly. And the only reason I didn't buy it is the cost of the work. That's the sole reason I didn't buy it. Deeply interested in the work because you could see the talent. But he still had that skill.
Have the conversations or change or things you're talking about, or does it?
Happening in the art world and what's happening in galleries and museums and how that relates. The last couple of years, financial advice. I mean, he's financial. And so in the last couple of years, direct certain aspects of my career and there with very quick advice. Call me now. So point me in the right direction.
With him about other artists who we often talk.
Very clear, very honest. Sometimes people, and so Alvin he's not afraid to be.
They don't want to hear me say an interesting idea, but it's not complete. I forward. The work, we know each other. If it's something that's really harsh, I'll set it up we were when we started out. I'm much kinder now. Sometimes I get an email, it's like, exactly. I think all I bring to our friendship is days off from work at 1 o'clock. And the show at Osmos, and when as you know at your work for a very
not a piece.
I did not buy. Followers would try to get me to buy a piece, and Wardell Milan is. I went to the Osmos galleries. I got there. Thing in me went off. Every one of my instincts said, "This is it. This." walked to the corner of Second Avenue, wasn't it? Over Second Avenue. I literally stopped. If I don't buy that, not one day, it had all the elements where the plane in which you look at the vertical, and there are those in my entryway, and I see it every single day.
So it's the image
every single day, and the confidence in that work was just so died. It's like love for you. I guess it would never die.
Yes. Yeah.
Even though now I've sort of clicked past, but it's okay. Can you how of your practice a bit that now is the 10 years ago.
Right.
Now, Alvin.
Right. Well, drawing has always been a part of the studio. Her Bessie's Mrs. Green. So drawing has always been a key element to the studio practice. As I would say, Wardell Milan, so that having the activity of going to an art class and craftsmanship really just continues to inform everything. Medium really became important to the practice in undergrad. Maybe like 10, 11, something like that. How to use it. I was just taking pictures and would advance, sometimes would come out. So my knowledge of the camera then became a strong element to the studio practice. So so now there's not really a hierarchy.
Curious, what was 10-year-old Wardell?
Probably our dog Pepper. Yeah, nothing. Sorry. I mean, they really. The longest I thought I was going to be an architect, and my parents they subscription to that magazine for like years. I don't even know how long. There's it out. So yeah. And so there's never.
Let's next talk about you at the museum and what I'm always interested to hear from start and then after think about it.
Right. I started a day job, and so once I got and saying that I was accepted, I put in my resignation. One of the energy and attention. I didn't have any. Wanted the opportunity to have that year to just and to be in a really nourishing environment. Kafar and Demetrius Oliver, most of you guys know that. Well, before the residency, so I had met Demetrius in Houston with Leslie Hewitt, who's also a Titus. I literally met Titus as I was running out of Yale. I was entering the program. I was leaving the program there because it was those 2 years were rough. So I was like in the so I remember that when I met him, I was like, oh, dude, we met. We exchanged war stories. So during the residency, close now. So that was the residency, having those two guys as friends and at Art Brothers.
It's still very exciting when you and Demetrius were the exhibition with him and sort of helped him. Did your work, you feel, become in conversation as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Chelsea. We had a studio space in Chelsea. So there's definitely a lot of connection. Still a lot of influences from we'll go up to New Haven, Titus. So yeah, I mean, we are constantly. Yeah.
And Alvin, do you remember? I'm sure you do. As a whole,
I remember all three of them. Very different practices and very different ways. Demetrius work designed to evoke Emmett Till evolved in a different way. For became more confident, you experimented more. It became much more the elegance of the work, but thinking it through. I remember you talked about throwing away some drawings one time. I remember that. And then each one you throw away and you learn something from each one. So you could see the development of them. And his work was, the three of them really benefited. Meeting the three of them was a change. I think artists are sometimes crazy. Of young men who had found a back studio over in Chelsea. I came to that studio, heard information, and how the work was.
Do you find, Alvin, that sort of changed how you interact with, really talking to them as much, but being on that sort of expanded?
Yes, the artist in residence, and how I taught the program was Leslie Hewitt. Conversation with an artist. We talked about her technique, and I started out collecting photography, and she was doing these very, very formal photographs in which some magazine showing a riot or some historical event or some people going up a step, and then there'd be a much more personal photograph. Personal narrative. I remember that conversation for as long as I live, and that was the point where I understood maybe work better, but also love most, and when an artist takes me ideas and concepts that are new, I don't, but I recommend them to everybody because I think they're so with some on them to these layering where it's like the I didn't expect to go on with you, but I find it absolutely.
These, I think, boxing
Right.
works up. Can you talk a little bit about these? I know.
Well, the idea comes from several different interests. Before here, and was you didn't know if it was some sort of set they're apart or building each other. Interesting uncertainty that was happening in the drawings. Making that work, that body work was titled "Desiring the Black Boxer," and these two individuals to exchange that happens between however long the became of interest, and also and you are developing the body that is, and then you ask or destroying the body only to build it back up. So it was just like this cycle that I became really interested in. I didn't know what to do with that at the time. I was just, on this boxing book. It's called The Fight. Not knowing what I wanted to do with it's always been a big part of my practice. So I have a book. We're upstairs, and that's where this body of collages really became to being in the studio. even what I'm. So I bought the one book, and then I ended up buying, I don't know, maybe like of
when was the book from?
Right. Yeah. But I don't know.
What's quite amazing about some of the images is in some cases fold over the back, just like the head is being hit and knocked off, but it's not a full cut.
I just take Alvin everywhere I go. Like, put him in my pocket. I'm not feeling so good right now. Out. Exactly. Make that.
And then next happened.
Right. The museum. Ali asked me to do this project. They aren't really typical of my practice. Because of when there are very few figures in the series, it's mainly of a random. I don't know. Seitu's right there. A good friend of Seitu, that's Nina. She's eating, like random objects on in the community and the people that inhabit this community and of this neighborhood. From my regular practice, primarily about architecture and.
Were you drawing from memory or?
From images that I would take walking around the neighborhood. Images that I took to reference the drawings.
Yeah. This is just a couple of install images. If you went back to.
Oh yeah, completely, absolutely. Yeah, they had one up. I think it was another slide. There's another image of a corner. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one with the. I believe those spaces are now being occupied.
Harlem?
Spanish Harlem.
Spanish Harlem.
Yep.
And how Spanish Harlem, all of Harlem, affected your work or your practice?
Amongst the minority in Spanish Harlem and Puerto Ricans, so it's fun to be like Mexican food.
Sure. What was so interesting and exciting having Midnight's Daydream up, but then as we were talking about this fact that you wanted to be an architect, your time reading Architect Digest and
right.
how that was what with and contemplate forever on the umbrella, which
right.
I use still.
As do I.
Yeah. A little bit to the Bearden Project, who don't know, was an exhibition where we asked 100 artists to create collages, and we sent people collage paper, and that was sort of it. So and ideas around what it means collage, but also what for us an exciting, but also to find that Bearden was a touchstone for. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Bearden is definitely the dioramas are made, but that I produce, that I make. How he and then for the show.
It's you can't really see. It's this one.
Yeah. So for that collage, I wanted to a subtle, well, I guess not so subtle, but a point of referencing the residency, and has developed into the
show that's on view upstairs. And
yeah, in that series, Beautiful Women.
That one is bodybuilding.
It's a series of inspiring women. So, I again, interested how to abstract the figure in my work. I'm looking at bodybuilders, particularly female bodybuilders, form their physical self. Not only aesthetics, but also how it relates to their physical self. In which the female form would transform and menstruation cycles. They will plants because of all the breast saying similar to the boxing. Boxing results, but at the same time, the body begins to break down on certain levels. These female bodybuilders. So the series, but the figure is again abstracted and fragmented.
That's all I have. And can you talk about how that came to be, and also that Del asked you to write for it, and the whole process?
Did during Kay and I were and so we started talking.
Sounds like a movie.
Right, so we were so at the time I wasn't working with the Lower East Side. So Sophie and I really didn't know like in which direction to take the conversation in terms of finding. And Alvin, we had the opportunity to again, have that conversation with David one afternoon, and it'd be great. And David is like, okay, and Kay Sophie's okay, fine, but Kay Sophie's like, no, but it's gotta be, and because she wanted for him to understand, like, this is how much it's gonna cost, and David was like, so it was a fun process to work with, and patients were thin as of this substantive
That you wanted to bring in, and sort of what.
Thinking about writers, Alvin was the first name to pop up. To try to write for the three that's that contributed, Leslie Hewitt, and I was super happy with the writers who were able to speak.
I was really honored. I started the essay by looking. I find the photographs, Wardell's sort of places things in changes depending upon where you start in the photographs. Psychologically fascinating in what they say about your thinking process. The idea of looking at the dioramas and actually had to write an essay that was a bit more personal. As a Southerner, what I think most people don't know, and sounds of, because I was raised in Florida, and lush greenery everywhere, and my grandmother had a garden. It started out as being this autobiography. I found the voice. I actually wrote the essay pretty quickly. They touched, where's Wardell, when I would look at the photographs, because he used to be in a lot of them. And we used to try to find Wardell. But then it was that idea that
my mother,
had his mother, and your sister, and you have these muscle cars, I call them erotic landscapes, flora and fauna that grows on his, not to use that word. And David said sensual landscape, about a certain lushness, it's very layered. Start out with an interior, becomes different as you go through, and you can, some of them are just haunting journey, and I love when you can share in the artist's career every time.
And I see The More I Know
Yes.
is a really, I think for anyone who's interested in looking and thinking about art, a really great takeaway, because it's true. I think the more.
Yes, when I did a BBC series on contemporary art, and one of the and doing a contemporary thing, a very interesting challenge. But in order to prepare for the show, which is mostly about UK artists, I spent a lot of time. I mean, I walk, and so by the time I do that, I don't always buy, develop, but I stay with the artist. If I really, although it was raining, I was very Jones. So even in the back, and so I've seen it, I've added it to my visual bank, my visual library, and I'll use it at some point. Stay with an artist. You know, you never know where that artist is going to take you.
Do either of you have questions for each?
Candy series, because I did a studio visit out of books, right. But I think when I came by the studio, and they all went off to Mexico, to some collector in Mexico. Some. What was the source of those works?
You describe them.
It actually was the first, one of the, I'm trying to remember, that I actually began to introduce color. So the title, and in the, I don't know if anyone has read that short story, male hustler, and he is to hustling other men for, you know, sexual encounter. They have this interaction in the balcony of the theater. So I'll just leave that narrative there. You know, you should read the story. So yeah, the drawings were influenced from that narrative. These relationships between whether they are potentially violent or sexual, or so thinking about that relationship and that strange.
And what about the color choices? The colors were very. Those colors.
Well, I'm really bad with using color in drawings and in painting. References to look at when using and being successful with using. So those were like the small choices of colors that I.
And you repeatedly go back to the nudie drawings, don't you?
I do. So nudie, the nudie works comes from a book. Again, appropriating the work and the publications from another artist and using is a book. Maybe fashion models of these graceful types of poses and gestures. So you, as a canvas, cutting them up and reimagining the figure in different poses, or collaging the figure. I began that series in 2009. Idea and that imagery earlier this year in 2000. Yes, yeah. To think about this idea of looking at particularly that book and those pages, and looking at will forever be young and forever be beautiful. So to myself with this idea of that dialogue with the work and with those images and with the idea of
Picking your source material, books that you use.
So it was often trying to populate the landscape or the interior that dramas, which has my mother playing the idea of. I knew the image, the appropriate people and image in the scene. Magazines and books, and I'm constantly looking, creating a library of.
Audience have any questions? Nico has a microphone, so.
Eddie, you can just raise your hand and I'll find you.
Really generous conversation that you're having in front of us. It's coming from such a personal place. About your drawings, there's in a lot of canvas that's exposed or white space to the dioramas. Thinking about when you're leaving that space open and how
The actual process of creating into constructing, and so oftentimes it would take 4 to much more of the surface into the material, into the subject or theme illustrating, and then and a wide way in the dioramas, but in the drawing, it just being about positive and negative, or the dualism, or themes of sexuality, or themes of drawings. It's much more formal. So that's why in the drawings it's entitled Mount Calvary, which would be the fourth of our lives, so a long time. The church that he and I grew up in. So my mother is again in this photograph. Different family members are in this image, and so when I began creating this style, open the religion that was the carpet green, yes. And then my the space is thinking about childhood and thinking about and how that becomes a part of, and in particular, Mount Calvary. So that's where Mount Calvary often references James Baldwin, and to reference and hopefully add another layer of dialogue.
Baptist church that also had green carpeting in the front of it. And so this was one of the things, members in it, but then that rich Tell It on the Mountain, which is a work that for me was very life and fresh from the country of Wakulla County, Florida, and never having gone before I left home. And so this work that we share, but it's also about this bigger issue of what beyond just the images in there, because the relative would not know just looking at it.
So we have about 45 minutes left before the museum closes, so you're welcome to stay here or check out the exhibition upstairs in the mezzanine. So thank you. And thank you guys.
I feel like you could have your own show. Absolutely.